get by. It resides between my eyes. Walk through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Sam Tejada of Liquivida. Sam, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since this is part of the health and longevity series on Inspired Insider, some other ones to check out. I had Dr. Michael Rose, who had a 40-year research project of, does aging stop? And I think it was 40 years of this fruit fly study. Sam, was super interesting of how he increased the lifespan. Now, the fruit fly lifespan is not large, but that was his research for 40 years ongoing. Another one was, we talked about immortality and ultramarathons with Dr. Bill Andrews. I was watching this Netflix special on longevity, and Dr. Bill Andrews and Aubrey de Grey were on there. And so I'm like, well, I might as well ask him to come on and talk about it. Another good one was Yuri Alkame. He has the company Healthpreneur, really interesting one, and many, many more. One of my favorite ones is Dr. Michael Fossil, MD, PhD, talks about his research on telomerase therapy. So that was interesting as well. Check those out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Sam, we kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it look easy for the host so they can run their company, create amazing content, and create amazing relationships. For me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, and I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25, and we'll answer any questions that you have. I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Sam Tejada. He's the author of How to Win in Modern Wellness. He's actually a former paramedic firefighter. His company has taken a personalized approach to modern wellness with his company, Liquivida. This is a special place in my heart because my background in biochemistry as a chiropractor, they really help get to the root cause of some of these issues for people. Sam's one of the co-founders of Liquivida, which is a multi-million-dollar company with franchise locations throughout the US. We'll talk a little bit about what is the qualification. So if you're like, oh, this sounds great, you could possibly contact them if you're a fit. Sam actually couples his medical background with a deep desire to help others lead healthier, happier lives. And actually, the company helps with transformative wellness services. They cater to individual needs. So we'll talk about some of the services, but IV therapy, weight management, regenerative therapies, hormone replacement therapy, advanced aesthetic procedures, and many more. There's a cool 40-minute video on YouTube that kind of actually gives a full tour of the office and the services. So Sam, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Doc. Thanks for having me here.
Just start off with, I know that you came from the Dominican Republic and of all places moved to Wisconsin. I think your parents were trying to torture you. Like if I lived in Dominican, I'm like, okay, let's go to the coldest place ever, which is Wisconsin, because I've lived there. Talk a little bit about growing up, because I'm sure you got some inspiration from your parents and maybe that entrepreneurial spirit as well.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right about the Dominican and Wisconsin. Everyone always asks me, they say, how did a Dominican end up in Wisconsin? And I would ask the same question all the time. But the answer to that is my uncle and my aunt, they both were living in Wisconsin. My uncle actually came to the United States to study, and he met his wife, my Aunt Joyce, which she's already passed away. And they're both architects. And my parents are architects. So when my parents decided to, migrate here to the United States, at that point in time, this is back in 1988, there were certain programs and visas that were available. So they had to make that decision because that's the time when it was available. And the best decision to come to the United States wasn't the typical route that Dominicans go, which is New York, right? They end up in Washington Heights or somewhere there in Manhattan. They went where my uncle was at because he already established his footprint as an architect. My parents are both architects. So my parents were able to come here to the United States and be able to work in their field of study, which is architectural.
So I know, fast forward a little bit, you were a paramedic firefighter, and you had to, well, a lot of firefighters start a side hustle, right? And so how did the idea of Liquivida come about?
So, I started at the fire department at a young age of 20. And I worked in the fire department as a firefighter paramedic until age 32, got vested in the pension, was able to retire. And halfway through that 12-year career, that's when I started Liquivida. So how did that come about? So the first 6 years at the fire department, I was working part-time on my days off with a company called Cenegenics. So Cenegenics was one of the pioneers in alternative medicine, where they did a lot of these executive physicals, and they catered to some of the who's, right? Some of the most affluent individuals on this globe. And a lot of these individuals, they have homes all over the world, right? They have homes in California, Colorado, have homes here in Florida, and then many other places around the world. So I started having a lot of these patients when I would go see them about every 3 months for those 6 years or so. I'd go to their home and I'd draw their blood. That's what I did for Cenegenics. And they were bringing up this whole vitamin IV therapy stuff. So by the time I had like the 5th patient bring this up and tell me about, how when they go back to their homes in California or Colorado, it's typically an off-duty firefighter paramedic who does these IVs. I said, you know what? Let me look into it. So I started, surfing the internet, and I saw what was going to be my competition, which a lot of them are my customers now. And I said, you know what? I can do this and I can do it better. And then that's where the idea was actually launched.
Sam, I know you gave a TED talk, and it's really about relationships. And one of the things that it seems you have a great skill set in is cultivating talent. So talk about when you decide to start, because you started Liquivida with $500. Okay.
Right.
But that's not really the whole story. The whole story is you really cultivated and created this amazing team, right? So talk about the talent that you surrounded yourself with when you started Liquivida.
So relationships is everything. And early on, when you were doing the introduction of the podcast, you mentioned that, relationships is one of the most important things to you. And I caught that because that's same thing with me. It's one of the most important things when it comes to business. And it's relationships with everything, relationships with your business partners, relationships with your vendors, relationships with your customers, with your business mentors. Those relationships, when you cultivate them, they can become into bigger and greater relationships. And that's what I talk about on my TED Talk. So, when I first started the company with $500 in my back pocket, it was really supposed to be just a side hustle on my days off from the fire department. Just like how most firemen, they always have a side hustle on their days off because we work 24 hours on and then we're off for 48 hours. So we always try to supplement our income. So, when I started the company and I started seeing the traction that we were creating, and people were driving an hour and a half to come get these vitamin drips, that's where I said, you know what? I got something here. I got to develop this into something bigger and greater. And the hard part for me is on a fireman's salary, it's not the easiest thing to do, especially when you start thinking about franchising. So after a year of opening up Liquivida and starting the business, I decided to put a new entity together called LQV Management, which has 5 partners. It has the chief medical officer, it has the chief marketing officer, the legal counsel, the CFO, and then myself as operations. So my goal with that was to create a group of partners that would put in sweat equity to build this company to what it is today. And it worked. Obviously, it comes with its challenges. Partnerships are not the easiest things to do or handle. But as long as you can focus on building strong relationships with those partners and making sure that you're aligned with the mission and the goals that we're trying to accomplish as a business, it can be very successful.
So Sam was the original, and by the way, if someone's watching the video, if you're listening to the audio, there's a video version. We're on Liquivida's site and we can see the about page here. Was the original then version of Liquivida mobile? Like you'd go to people's homes and do the drips until you actually had the first physical location?
It wasn't. Actually, the mobile service is something we added to it. So I think you'll get a kick out of this one because obviously your background as a chiropractor is my first Liquivida location. What I decided to do, I said, I don't have the cash to actually open up a brick and mortar. How can I go ahead and start this IV business and still have that retail location in a brick and mortar? So there's a chiropractor close by my house, Dr. Howard Newman, and he had a beautiful wellness center. He was a chiropractor that was just far beyond the times, right? So he's the chiropractor. So his facility was called East West Physicians, where basically he took Eastern and Western medicine and integrated together. So he had a facility that was doing not just your typical like PIP injuries and stuff. He had medical integrated into it to actually handle a lot of these injury cases and pain management. But he had acupuncture, he had aesthetics, he had hydroclonic therapy, he had physical therapy. It was just a beautiful facility that encompassed everything you can think of when it was about health and wellness and taking that proactive approach to your health. Now, just like any doctor, right, you go to their facility and typically they have a few rooms that are just collecting dust. So that's where I went in there and I told him, I says, hey, doc, you got this room, this physical therapy room that you don't have a physical therapist right now. It's just a bunch of equipment. Let's get this room to make you some money. And I threw him the proposition. I said, on my days off, I'll come here. I'll be the operator of this business unit for the IV vitamin therapy stuff. I'll run it. I'll physically do the IVs myself. And I'll give you 20% right off the top. And, he looked at me like I had something growing out of my head. He says, hold on, you're going to come here, put in all this work, front the money to build out the room to the brand specs and everything that I've developed. And I have to do absolutely nothing but just give you this space and you're going to give me 20%. I said, yeah. So my goal with that was basically creating something that didn't make me put too much cash out of pocket. And the cash that I had to put out of pocket, I wanted it to go to building up the business and bringing in new business. So my goal was, let's develop the MVP, the minimal viable product. So I went into that office. I didn't have to pay for utilities. I didn't have to pay for a medical director. I didn't have to pay for a receptionist, and I didn't have to pay rent. So now all of the money that was going into the business was actually going into producing revenue. So that's how I started Liquivida. And then we started adding a lot of the other modalities and stuff to it.
No, that's really smart. It's really a proof of concept, and it's very low overhead. It's low risk for you. It's also low risk for the office,
Right.
actually, because it's found money for them, and they get an added service that benefits their patient base as well. So really smart. And we'll go into how does it work with the franchising and from an existing location to a new location. But I do want to talk about, you mentioned the partnerships, and you have your chief medical officer, Dr. Christopher Davis, and talk about how you met Dr. Davis.
So our initial chief medical officer was Dr. Robert Willix, which Dr. Willix was also the chief medical officer of Cenegenics. He was world renowned, and he would teach doctors from all over the world. He would teach with the A4M, the AMMG, all the accredited functional medicine organizations that are out there. He would teach for them. He's also, published author of many, many books on preventative health. Unfortunately, Dr. Willix, who was my mentor for many years, He was a former heart surgeon who decided to get away from heart surgery so he can prevent patients from going on the operating table. Dr. Willix passed away right before COVID at the age of 80, unfortunately.
Sorry to hear that.
So, yeah, he interesting guy, big into energy medicine, and his story is just a very wonderful story of, he actually passed away while meditating. That's how they found him, actually meditating right before he took his first patient for the day at the office. Which, if you're into energy medicine, that they basically say you've crossed over to the other side at that point. So once he passed away, I had to think about, well, who's going to go ahead and step in his shoes as the new chief medical officer of Liquivida? So Dr. Christopher Davis actually came on board as a franchisee for our integrated Liquivida model, where basically his cardiology practice that he was currently at that time switching over to more of a functional medicine practice with a hyper focus on cardiology. He put a Liquivida lounge inside of it doing the IV drips for his patients. Dr. Davis, strong cardiology background, similar to Dr. Willix, very smart. He's a researcher himself. He's also on the scientific advisory board with the association. And he was just the perfect fit to step into Dr. Willix's shoes. So at that point in time, I proposed a partnership deal with him to come on board as an equity partner. And we've been spearheading, Liquivida collectively together and focus on the mission.
So I'll kind of break this up a little bit, Sam, into some of the services and what you do at Liquivida, and then kind of how the franchise works. So if people can understand a little bit more how it works to get involved if they want. From the services side, talk about some of the testing, because I think one of the unique pieces of Liquivida, you don't just necessarily go in, I mean, you probably can and get an IV drip or something of vitamins, but you have a really comprehensive way of testing and really getting to the root cause. So talk about some of the testing that you utilize with the offices.
So it's very important for us to be data-driven when it comes to a patient's health. So one of the things that we put a lot of emphasis on is making sure that people are going through these different type of diagnostic testing, so we get a good bird's eye view of what's happening with the patient's health. So we want to get as much data points from the patient to really see what's going on and try to figure out the root cause of why they're feeling fatigue, why they're increasing in weight or unable to lose weight. So when it comes to the testing that we do, first, the first step that we take is we do a lifestyle assessment and questionnaire. We want to know exactly how this person is living their life day to day, what they're eating, are they exercising, are they putting certain toxic things into their body, are they smoking, are they drinking frequently, what is their lifestyle like, what's their environment that they're in, what's the job that they have, is it a job that's causing severe sleep deprivation, are they a firefighter, paramedic, or a police officer? Is it a police officer that's going to the shooting range and getting exposed and inhaling lead consistently, or they potentially might have heavy metals that causes all kinds of neurological issues? So for us is, starting off with the lifestyle assessment. From there, we start doing some of our diagnostics. So we want to know what their body is made up of. So we do what's called a body composition analysis, right? We utilize a DEXA scan to do the body composition analysis, which historically has been known to be utilized for bone density, which, yes, we do that as well. But we want to know exactly what your body's made up of, how much lean mass you have, how much adipose fat you have, which is more of that fluffy fat, and then most importantly, how much visceral fat you have that's lining your organs, right? So for us, is really understanding what your body's made up of. And then we have other tests that we run, like we do a VO2 max, looking at lung function, cardiovascular function, and cellular health. We work with a lot of athletes to increase and enhance their endurance with the VO2 max. Then we also do what's called an RMR. So the RMR is the resting metabolic rate, where we have the ability to see how many calories you're burning at a rested state. So what does that information give me? So that information will allow me to know exactly how many macros and micros you need to intake on a daily basis throughout your meals throughout the day, for us to accomplish those goals. It'll also tell me if you're working out enough, or if you're working out too much, or if you're not working out enough, right? So those data points are critical when we're actually trying to customize a precision health plan for the patient. Now, one of the other tests that we do is our blood work. Now, when I say blood work, this is not your typical blood work when you go to your general practitioner's office. We do a very, very comprehensive blood analysis. We're testing everything from micronutrients deficiencies, which include vitamins, minerals, amino acids, different antioxidants, that your body actually needs for it to function. It's part of your body's biochemistry. So that's part of the blood work. We're checking all your different hormones. We're looking at inflammation markers. We're looking at food sensitivity. We're looking at environmental toxins you can potentially get exposed to. I mean, we're looking at over 1,000 biomarkers that we go through to really see how your health is performing. Most medical practitioners will only test for about 80% of what we do if you're symptomatic, right? A lot of the times, if you're symptomatic, sometimes it's too late. I mean, how many times have we heard of a family member or friend come back and says, hey, I just got diagnosed with cancer and it's stage 4 cancer? Anytime that happens to me, first question I said, well, what happened to stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, right? So sometimes you got to keep in mind that you don't wait until you're symptomatic, because disease hides very well in your body. So these are some of the tests we do. We have other specialized labs for other testing, depending on what comes back on your initial diagnostics that we do. But for the most part, this has given us a good bird's eye view of what's happening with the patient's health.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for going over that. And from there, now you figure out, okay, what's going on, and then you customize the treatment accordingly.
Right. So there's a lot of customization. No patient is the same. Everyone has certain goals they're trying to accomplish, and then everyone has different deficiencies. So from there, we customize the plan specific to the patient's data that we retrieve through the different diagnostics.
Originally, I'm curious of the evolution of the services a little bit, right? Because it sounds like, so it started with IV therapy, and like you can see here, we're looking at the website, people do it for aging things, for hangover things, for mental focus, for fighting sickness. And there's, one of the things that was interesting from one of your videos was, you have this proprietary product actually, and you're not the only clinics to use it. Other clinics use it. Can you talk about that? Because that's an interesting from a clinical standpoint, also from a business model standpoint as well.
Right. So, obviously with my background being a fireman, one of the things that, joking around in the fire department, we would always say everything has to be fireman proof, right? So fancy word for idiot proof. So in the back of the truck, in the rescue truck, everything is typically pre-measured, pre-dosed. So we're not in the back of a bouncing truck trying to do drug calculations and everything else, right? We just give the different antidysrhythmics depending, whatever the medical emergency is. Now, when I first got into the field with IV vitamin therapy, the way that IV vitamin therapy was created is you were playing the role of like a mad scientist, right? You had about 20 to 30 different multi-dose vials. You were creating the osmolarity of these IV bags.
I've seen people do it, like they're drawing out a different, they're basically taking individual syringes, drawing it out of, we need the B12, squirt it in there. We need the vitamin C, we squirt it in there.
So, and even though we're talking about vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, things that are water soluble, when you're going directly into the vein, it can become toxic if you give the wrong dosage, right? You give a patient too much zinc, it can cause irreversible hearing loss. I don't want that on my watch, right? So as I'm going through it and thinking like scalability, where you have hundreds of locations or you have thousands of people doing these IV drips, medical providers doing these IV drips, I said, well, how do we reduce the potential for risk, with these IV drips? Because all it takes is one nurse who's not thinking and puts the wrong thing in the bag. So I said, well, things have to be fireman proof, right? Pre-measured, pre-dosed. Let's create different formulas and, let's take a lot of the data from the years that we've been in business and see what fits most of the different personas best. So that's where I teamed up with a group of chemists and pharmacists out of a 503B compounding facility, which is a FDA registered facility. And we created what's called the IV infusion kits and packets, where basically we have these packets where everything's pre-measured, pre-dosed. They're not multi-dose vials, so they don't have any preservatives, which obviously preservatives, typically the preservative they put in the multi-dose vials is benzyl alcohol. But when you go directly into the bloodstream with that, it's a toxin, right? It causes oxidative stress. What happens when you have oxidative stress from a toxin? It increases inflammation in the body. So what we're trying to do with the IV drips is the complete opposite. So what I ended up doing with the team is we created the cleanest, the most potent IV vitamin therapy product out in the market. It's the highest quality product in the market here in the United States. And since I launched that a handful of years ago, we have well over 4,000 doctors nationwide that purchase our product and offer it to their patients.
How'd they find out about it? Just the
Oh,
IV part.
That's you got to get the content out there. You got to get in front of them. So that's where my passion is. Speaking publicly. Publishing a lot of different articles. I run my own podcast. I'm big into content creation. I have a whole video production team full time that follows me around. It's getting in front of them.
Let's talk about the business side for a little bit. So obviously, people can check out Liquivida from the patient side. They have locations, all over the U.S. Actually. So we're still missing one in Chicago, so we're gonna have to get that going so I can go to one of them. But from Florida to Arizona to Texas to New Jersey to Connecticut, all over the place, and expanding. Talk about how does it work? Who's a fit for becoming, like saying, this is great. I know a medical practitioner. I love this. I know a lot in Chicago. I need to convince one to basically start with Liquivida so I can get the treatment. How does it work? Who's a fit?
So on the business side, the best fit is a medical provider who's trying to get out of the allopathic world of medicine, right? As medical providers are great medical providers. And one of the areas that they usually lack in the ability to scale in is the business side. So when you talk about franchising, the purpose of franchising is so you don't have to figure out all of the business stuff yourself, which comes with a lot of failure, trying to figure it out, comes with burning a lot of money, trying to figure things out. So what we've done in over 10 years is figure out what works and what doesn't work and create those systems and processes for medical providers that want to get into the industry where we can make it easy for them and help them on the business side, right? Give them all the tools and ammunition for them to be successful. So, medical providers from nurse practitioners, physician assistants, DOs, MDs, chiropractic physicians, or even in some states, naturopathic doctors. This is a great opportunity. Also for the business individual, someone who wants to diversify their investments and get more into the health and wellness space, more on the preventative medicine side. This is a good avenue as well too. Now, as a business person, you would have to hire all of your medical professionals the same way I did personally. I'm not a doctor, so I had to hire people myself as well too.
So talk about having an existing location versus opening a new location. Like, can a doctor implement this? Because when I picture a franchise, I guess I picture we're erecting something from scratch that looks exactly like every other, clinic or restaurant or whatever it is. So I don't know, is there an opportunity for an existing doctor to put kind of like what you did, a room, or does it have to be kind of a new facility? How does it work as far as what's a fit of when they implement it?
Yeah, so we have two franchise models. So the two franchise model, the first one that you mentioned is the brick and mortar model, where basically it encompasses all of the different services and modalities that we offer as a company. And then the second franchise model is our integrated Liquivida Lounge, where basically what we do is we put all of the different, we put a IV lounge in one of your rooms, and basically it becomes a Liquivida Lounge at so-and-so's practice, Dr. Smith's practice. And then from there, we put you on the website, help you with the marketing, we train all of your team members. So yeah, there is an opportunity to put a Liquivida IV Lounge franchise within your existing practice. It's a great way to add an additional revenue stream to your practice. It's turnkey, the way that we set it up. And then for the doctors that don't want to do the franchise model, they can just purchase the product. And we have an online portal system that has tons of marketing tools, has a lot of educational tools. That what we do is we support the physicians that buy the product with all of the tools and ammunition that they need to be successful.
That makes sense, Sam. So someone could put a lounge, they could erect a full facility, which is like the full brick and mortar, or they could say, listen, I just want to buy your product and implement certain types of your products, and people can do that as well.
Right. And the full brick and mortar is more than just IV therapy, has all the different diagnostic tools that we use. How we mentioned, the DEXA scan, VO2 max, InBody, has other biohacking technologies like the pulse electromagnetic field therapy chairs. We use a company that's called Pulse for that. We do all of the medical aesthetic procedures, the Botox, the fillers, body contouring. We do hormone optimization. We do medical weight loss. We use a lot of the GLP-1 drugs that have become very popular. And then it has the IV lounge in it as well, too. So it's significantly different, but if you want to just offer IVs, there is the integrated IV lounge franchise model, and then also getting the products.
Talk about, I know it seems to me one of your passions is marketing, and from your videos and the content, and obviously that helps these doctors or locations get patients. So talk about what works from a marketing standpoint for some of these offices to gain visibility and to get more patients in the door.
So I always tell people to focus on three things, right? Visibility, notability, and becoming the authority in your space. At minimum, becoming the authority in your territory. So how do you do that? First step is education. You have to be able to educate people on what you do. So you have to utilize every possible outlet to be able to educate the potential end consumer. So, part of that is we live in a digital world. So in the digital world, you have all the different social media platforms. They're all different. YouTube is significantly different than Instagram, right? You have long form, short form content. So it's about getting the information out there. You don't have to get crazy and have this wonderful setup. When I first started, I didn't have all of this, right? I didn't have a whole video production crew. It all just really started off with the iPhone, right? Getting in front of the iPhone and just talking and just posting. And then from there, as I started, following other people and their content and seeing what they're doing, then the creative started, enhancing. Where then eventually I, developed the whole team in Pakistan that works for me full time. I got about 10 people out there doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. Got another 5 in Colombia. And then I have a monster of a team here, that follows us around with cameras and does a lot of patient testimonials, record the procedures. So, content is very important. I think most people have heard of SEO, search engine optimization. You need a significant amount of content to be able to rank. You need a lot of backlinking. So getting, your message published in high domain authority publications that will link back to your website is important. It'll help you rank for SEO. And then have active writing. I have 3 full-time writers that are just consistently writing blog articles or writing for the doctors or writing for myself, and just getting that message out there. The more content that you can get out online, the better you're going to do when it comes to notability, visibility, and becoming the authority.
Yeah, and obviously one of the benefits of a franchise or Liquivida is you're, basically putting out all this content information. So when they go and they check out the different locations, like I am now, I check out the one closest to me, and they're getting, visibility and new patients from that sense as well.
Right.
I do want to talk about the American IV Association and talk about your involvement there.
So yeah, the American IV Association, that was founded by Jeff Cohen. He's a leading healthcare attorney in the alternative medicine space. And so Jeff Cohen and his associates, they started it about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years. And about, give or take about almost a year ago, maybe about 9 months ago, myself and a few other CEOs in the industry, we noticed that the industry had a need for us to really create that one strong voice. And the American IV Association was struggling a bit to really penetrate the industry, because it wasn't getting the buy-in from the industry. So what we ended up doing is myself and a few other CEOs in the industry, we proposed this to Jeff Cohen, and we said, hey, why don't you put a leadership advisory board together, and let's go ahead and collectively get together and create that one strong voice. Where basically you have 3 big competitors on a global level that came together and said, hey, this is not about Liquivida, this is not about Drip Bar, this is not about Revive, this is about the industry. So obviously one of the things that led them to appoint me as the chairman of the association is, all of the strong content that I've been creating, right? I've created a strong footprint myself, being the face of the industry, speaking publicly, where, instead of reinventing the wheel, let's go ahead and take what Sam Tejada has already developed with himself, his personal brand and Liquivida, and let's leverage that with all of the other people that are sitting on the board. So then from there, what we ended up doing is we created 20 founding member seats, which also those founding member seats include, top CEOs and doctors in the industry, which those 20 founding member seats create the different committees that we have that set a lot of the standardization and protocols that we implement into the industry. We're doing accredited trainings as well. There's online platforms that have been developed by Revive, their sister company called IV Pro. So the purpose of the association is really to create that one strong voice, to create a strong cohesion behind the companies that are leading the industry, and be able to put some level of control, be able to respond to some of these incidents that occur with that one bad apple in a bunch. Work with the media, give them truthful, factual information. As you know, Doc, the media can twist a lot of things that happen out there when in the medical field, when the factual information is not really in front of them. So our goal is to be able to work with them, provide factual information. We have a scientific advisory board made up of all the different chief medical officers globally that are doing some R&D and taking a lot of the data that we have in our systems, which, mind you, some of us have been in business for well over 10 years, some people over 15 years, where we're taking a lot of the data in our different EMR and EHR systems, and we're taking that quantifiable data and putting research behind it so we can go ahead and publish it as well.
Love it. Sam, I have one last question before I ask it. I want to point people to liquivida.com to learn more about what you're doing in the company. It's really amazing what you've done from firefighter to $500 and beyond, and starting this business and growing it. My last question is as mentors. I know, again, you're all about relationships. What are some of the valuable mentors you've had and maybe a piece of advice they gave you.
So one of my biggest mentors that I have, his name is Tejada. And this one's interesting because, when I first started Liquivida, I was a one-man show. And Yadek, a successful entrepreneur in the world of real estate, he was driving about 45 minutes to come get his IV drip. And, he proposed, he actually proposed something to me. He says, hey, instead of me driving 45 minutes to come here and get this IV drip and then have to drive 45 minutes back to my house in Fort Lauderdale, how about if I just pay you extra and you come to my house? So I would leave the fire department and go to his house and give him these IV drips. He was one of my first patients. Till today, he's one of my patients. It went from him being a customer, one of our patients, to, sitting down and going out to lunch with him frequently, and him being a business mentor, giving me guidance of, things to expect, things to I should look into when it comes to business, to then him becoming one of my dear friends, where now I'm helping him build his personal brand. We're just finalizing his book, his first book. And I fly around with him on his private jet now, and we're doing a lot of PR stuff together. We actually fly out next week to Las Vegas and also LA. We'll be on a lot of big podcasts out there and, doing some stuff with big influencers. We'll be on the news. So where I'm going with this is, number one, you never know who can be your business mentor. It could be your customer that's right in front of you, right? And then number two, when you cultivate those relationships and they become greater relationships, that customer can become a business mentor who can then become a dear friend of yours. And then it can actually switch the roles where eventually you become their mentor. And that's what has happened. And I won't forget, this was about a year ago. We were out to lunch. Mind you, this is almost 9 years of us knowing each other, him being my business mentor. Where I told him about me writing my book, How to Win in Modern Wellness. And I told him, I said, Yadek, you've built such great success. You're one of the few single owners of multifamily, real estate, probably the biggest in the United States. And I told him, says, people got to know your story. You got to leave legacy behind. So I started telling him everything that I'm doing with content creation and the team that I've developed. He got out of his seat during lunch. He says, oh my God. He says, Sam, for the last 9 years, I've been your business mentor teaching you. And look at this now. You're teaching me. He says, this is unbelievable. And he invited me to one of these big, right then and there, he invited me to one of these big masterminds that he's a part of. He pays like $150,000 a year to be part of it with all these top CEOs. He says, hey, but in the next 2 days, get ready. You're coming on my jet. We're going to this mastermind. I'm bringing you as a guest. And since then, the relationship has just gotten stronger and stronger and stronger.
Love it. Sam, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone check out liquivida.com, more episodes of the podcast. We'll see everyone next time. Sam, thanks so much.
Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.